Welcome everybody to another installment of the Runners Who Read live conversation. My name is Olivia Baker, and our guest today is Martinus Evans. Nearly 11 years ago, Martinus Evans was told by his doctor that he needed to, quote, lose weight or die. Since then, Evans has run 8 marathons and over 100 races at varying distances, and featured in multiple renowned publications such as the New York Times and Men's Health, and created his own running club. The group he founded, called Slow AF Run Club, which was formed with the goal of empowering everybody to become a runner. Though he currently in an online community that has 1,000 members worldwide. Also recently put his first book, Slow AF Run Club, the ultimate guide for anyone who wants to run, which we just read as a Runners Who Read July book, and we'll be discussing tonight. So everyone, please welcome author, founder, runner, Martinus Evans.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming to chat with us tonight. Before I get into the this book and what did the writing and editing process look like for you?
Oh man, so it took me about 18 months to 2 years to write this book. Um, Luckily, we had a national pandemic that kind of set everybody down, so I had a little bit more time to work on it. But yeah, I wrote this thing during the pandemic, and it was one of the reasons why I felt like now was the time to write the book. So yeah, it took about 18 months to write it. Um, I did things a little bit differently. So I hired my own editor before I sent it in to the publisher. So that was a hack that I learned way back in the day when I was in college, was to befriend an English major, and have them edit the stuff before you turn it in paper. So I kind of did the same thing for this book as well. Is that I hired a editor to come in and edit the book as I was writing it. And then that way, when I sent it to the publisher, pretty much everything, I would say about 95% of everything that I had wrote before I sent to the publisher pretty much stayed the same.
Wow. So this is or raw. This is straight up your experience and knowledge on paper. That's really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh yeah. Well, let's dive into that story. Um, so as I opened the introduction, you had that initial doctor's visit where the doctor was really quite rude to you and told you basically that you need to lose weight or die. And when you said, well, then I'm going to run a marathon, um, he was kind of like, oh, but you can't run a marathon. I don't think you're going to be able to do it. And you stormed out of his office, and months later you were able to do that. But the road was pretty long. We talked about going through a lot of that journey by yourself. And so can you speak more to what that journey looked like and how you found the motivation, especially on to get out there on your own?
Yes. So, yes, the journey to run a marathon took about 18 months in total. Um, I met the doctor in June. I didn't run the first marathon until October 2013. So, um, let's start with the doctor's appointment first, because I always find this interesting, right? And like, they make things in ways so like it's um not they, but like the way that the introduction is written is in a way that it makes people like intrigued. You're like, oh, Martinez got this stern doctor's um like advice, right? And I would say it was not all that. So let's talk about it. So the reason I went to this doctor was
Yeah.
because I was working 8 to 10 hours on my feet as a commissioned suit salesman. So like I sold suits at Men's Warehouse. So I was on my feet like 8 to 10 hours a day. Like if anybody ever worked in commission sales at a like at a retail spot, like you're on your feet. It's not like you just like sitting on your butt chilling. So I'm on my feet hustling, right? And I develop like this hip pain from like me being on my feet this long. So I go see a doctor. Wasn't my regular doctor. It was like a orthopedic specialist. Um, like it wasn't like a PCP or like your primary care doctor. This is a um like an orthopedic specialist, right? So I go to this orthopedic specialist and I'm like, okay, hey, hey, doc, I used to play football. I'm on my feet 8 to 10 hours a day. My hip hurts. Help me. And instead of him being like, okay, well, let's take a look at this hip. Let's figure out what's going on. He was like, I know what's wrong with you. You're fat. Lose weight or die. So for me and like everyone else, like who's ever like experienced this type of thing, like your eyeball can literally be hanging out your eye. And you're like, doc, please help me. And it's like, oh yeah, we'll get to that. But let's talk about how fat you are, how the fat in your head is pushing out your eyeball. So I kind of felt like that. Well, that was what I was going through with this doctor. So he's like, oh, you need to start walking to lose weight, all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm on my feet 10 hours a day selling suits. Like, what do you mean I need to go to a track and start walking the weight off when I'm already on my feet? So me being the guy who I am, I was like, I'm gonna run a marathon. And he laughed at me and told me that was the dumbest thing he has heard in all his years of practicing medicine. So, he goes on to say, like, if you run a marathon, you're gonna die. So now I'm sitting in this chair, like, all right, this dude is just talking out the side of his neck. I need to lose weight or die, right? Or if I try to run a marathon, I'm gonna die too. So it's like, well, what do you want me to do? So the conversation, it was not even a conversation, more like an argument. The argument that we had um was like very intense because I'm like, well, what do you want me to do then? Because you're not making sense. And it's like, well, you just need to lose weight. I said, okay, I'm gonna run a marathon. Well, you're gonna die if you run a marathon. I'm like, well, this is dumb. So it did not like come to a solution. So I just left the doctor's office, right? I stormed out the
Yeah,
doctor's
I
office
mean, that's
and just went
crazy
from
because
there.
he's like, lose weight, but not like that. Kind of like
Yeah,
it felt like, yeah, it very much didn't make sense.
exactly. So, with that being said, like I bought shoes that day and I got on a treadmill and I started running. But let's fill in the gap where um people always ask me, well, what happened to your hip? Well, what happened to my hip is that I went to go see another doctor. And that doctor was like, hey, you have hip bursitis. This is curable. You know what you need? You need physical therapy. Go get 10 weeks of physical therapy. Great. So I go to physical therapy and I'm telling them, like, hey, like I want to run a marathon. Like I'm trying to run a marathon. I'm doing Costa 5K. And they was like, perfect. You want to run a marathon? Go for it. This is what we want you to do. We want you to run before you come to physical therapy. And if you have any problems, we can troubleshoot it as you go on this journey. So like that's what happened. And like it's unfortunate that people have to go through that. And I believe that if the person wasn't me, like if I am not the already like competitive guy that I am, like the guy who's going to like balk at authority, like and that was somebody else, like I wholeheartedly think that that person just would have went home and just be like, like I need to lose weight. It's just another doctor telling me I need to lose weight and not getting my pain situated.
Mhm. Y- Yeah, I mean, and that is really, really sad as a person who wants to go into the medical profession, after I finished running professionally, I've definitely learned a lot about how medical practitioners treat people whom they view as overweight or who they see as, or even people of color as well, experience that. And so I'm glad that you're the type of person who's willing to go against authority in that way and really find where the actual source of your pain was, because yeah, that's really unacceptable.
Yes.
But yeah, so I want to continue on this. So you in physical therapy, the hip, and then you running. But along the way, you mentioned doing a lot of this at the beginning on your own. And so what did that look like? How did you find motivation to get out there by yourself?
So the motivation was pure spite. Uh spite is a great motivator. The sheer anger of somebody pissing you off and you're being like, I'm going to prove those people wrong is a great motivator. And that's what kept me going for like I would say all the way up until the marathon was like, I need to prove this doctor wrong. Like this doctor sucks and I need to prove to him, to the world, and to myself that I can do it. So like that was the main thing that kept me like more or less motivated. Um the journey of long, like I think when you are I know for myself, like I'm a first generation everything, right? So I'm the first person in my family to go to college. I'm the first person in my family to go to grad school. The first person in my family to like pretty much like do anything, like leave the state of like leave the city of Detroit. So knowing that when you're blazing trails, most of the time it will be lonely and people don't understand what you're going through. And you really have to like rely on your own your own self and like constantly have those self-talk conversations with yourself to like keep going. And that's more or less what I went through, right? It was hard. But I knew it was gonna be rewarding. And what I knew from all of this was like I was angry. And that spite was gonna keep me going.
And you got whole, what did you say the gap was between like almost 16 years from that doctor appointment to your first marathon?
What was that question again? I didn't catch that.
Oh, I said, how long was it from your doctor's appointment to your first marathon? I
18 months. So it took me
hear
about
that it was maybe 18 months.
yeah,
18 months.
yeah, about 18 months from when I met the doctor till I ran my first marathon.
Wow. And then so after that, you achieve your goal of running this marathon, and I think you addressed your book a little bit as well. That sometimes when you reach your goals, um, experience this fall off in motivation afterwards. Or it's like I got to my goal now. What's next? How do you then continue to find motivation to keep going?
That is an amazing question. So yes, ran the race, got through the marathon. Post race depression is is a very hard thing to go through, right? Um, and I remember reading something about Usain Bolt about how he trained for uh trained for the Olympics, right? And how he's like, I trained 4 years for 4 seconds of my life. Like I spent 4 years to do all these things just for like two blinks of an eye. And then like, what do you do now? And I think that is something that I also experienced with this marathon training that I spent 18 months of my life thinking about this marathon, breathing about it, having this anger, having this spite, and being like, nope, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. And then actually do it and just feel empty. Like I literally felt empty inside. Like, yo, what do I do now? To the point where I almost like just gave up running to say, hang it up. I'm done. Like grand opening, grand closing. I ran that marathon and I'm done. And I think from there, one of the things that I did is really just think about like reframe like what this journey means to me and like what this journey is, right? I think the other thing um that kind of helped me throughout my journey, like during that part, is that I got into like a very bad car accident a few months after running that race. So I ran the marathon in October. By January, I get in this very bad accident and like not able to run. So I get very sad, get very depressed. And I think the thing that really drove me about this to like get back out there was like running was taken away from me, but it wasn't on my terms. Like, yeah, I was going through this trepidation of like, and I'm running again, and I'm running anymore, so on and so forth. And then like it was just taken away from me and it wasn't on my terms. And I think for me, like that was the main motivator to say, oh, I need to do this and I need to continue to go, because looking back and reflecting, like running and participating in races and high-fiving people, it's the thing that I really enjoyed, this newfound thing that I didn't know I was going to have, and now I have it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as someone who experienced an injury well, or if that is, so I can definitely see how it's added to your motivation.
Yes. I did not hear that last question at all. Like your lips were moving, but the sound has not caught up.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was actually a question. It was just a comment,
Okay.
um, just about how, yeah, about just about running and how you pointed out that it can be motivating to get back to it when it's been taken away, not on your terms.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I'm forward. Yeah. Um, I want to get to some other practical advice that you talked about in your book. Um, so something that I really enjoyed reading about was your description of conversational pace, or as you call it, sexy pace. Um, I wanted to know, how did you go about determining what your sexy pace is?
Um, how did I determine what my sexy pace is? Um, this is I don't sexy pace has been one of the things now that like everybody's like, we need to change conversational pace to sexy pace because it sounds cooler. And I'm like, oh, this is something I've been doing for a very long time. Like, oh, like you didn't call it sexy pace? Like, oh my God, who comes up with these terms there? Um, but so let's talk about like how did I come up with sexy pace, right? Like I remember reading one of the books and it's like, oh yeah, you need to run in speed where like you can like talk to a friend, and like it shouldn't be labored breathing or things of that sort. And I remember doing that and being like, man, like this is like I'm not excited about this. Like conversational pace, like just the whole term just sounds like so medical and dry. I'm like, I'm not excited about conversational pace, especially if this is the pace at which I'm supposed to run like 70 to 80% of my runs at. Like, this is not fun. I don't want to get excited about conversational pace. I said, and then I was like, like I want to get like if this is something I'm going to do 80% of the time, like I need to feel like good about this. And I remember like I need to feel sexy about this. And then I was like, sexy pace. This is what I'm going to call it now, right? So that's one of the reasons like how I came up with it. But like finding it was the same thing of like, all right, talking to a friend. One of the things I like to do is like sing songs while I'm running, or just like, once I decided like, oh, this is gonna be sexy pace, I'm like, oh, like I need to get in my Baywatch bag. Like, let me get my floaty and my red shorts and like just run with the music behind me. And I was like, well, I'm already running slow anyway, so I might as well run in slow motion and just be sexy with it and let the wind blow in my hair like Baywatch.
That is hilarious. I love that. But I meant determining the physical pace. Because I know something I had trouble with early on when I first started running sexy pace is that it's easy to think that a pace is going to be easy when you're only running it for 10 minutes. But then when you try to hold it for an hour or 2 hours, you realize, oh, this pace wasn't really my easy pace or sexy pace. So how did you go about determining what that pace, that physical pace was for you?
So now that is a very interesting question, right? Like, yes, like what people think, oh, it's a sexy pace for like a 15-20 minute run is definitely not the same pace that's an hour plus, right? Um, I think the main way that I determined how or like what my sexy pace was any at a speed that I can sustain for anything over 45 minutes at a consistent pace or at a consistent speed was my sexy pace. For me, and my thinking was, well, if I can sustain this for 45 minutes, I can sustain it for 2 hours. And if I can sustain it for 2 hours, I can sustain it for the rest of my time. So that's more or less how I came up with it. I don't have any fancy formulas or anything else. Like that was just my logic. Like, okay, if I can run for 45 minutes at this pace, this is my sexy pace.
Got it. Got it. I want to move to another piece of the running puzzle that doesn't involve running and talk about lifting for a minute. I know that a lot of runners kind of look at lifting as a secondary thing or something they feel like they might not have time for at times. But in your book, you almost give like half a chapter to lifting it and are clearly a big fan of doing so. So could you speak a little bit about the importance of lifting and how you manage to fit that into your training schedule?
Yeah. So I guess the gift and the curse of this is like I'm not a professional athlete, and like my livelihood don't depend on whether I get first, second, or third place. So like I can kind of do things at a leisurely clip. So um, I'll be asking you about time management later on. But one of the things that I learned um early on in running was this notion of like, oh, if you don't spend time doing the things like working on your weaknesses, you'll spend time injured in the doctor's office and in physical therapy. And I think it only takes like for me, it only took one bad trip or one bad season of plantar fasciitis slash Achilles tendonitis slash dead butt syndrome, all to like happen back to back to back in one season for me to be like, oh, I understand and now I respect the process, right? That the whole notion of respect the process or it will disrespect you. And the process completely disrespected me. So from that point on, like I only need that one time to happen for me to be like, oh, like I need to work on this. Like I sit down a very long period of time. I need to wake my glutes up. Like I don't want dead butt syndrome. I don't want all the other things that comes along with dead butt syndrome. And my motto when it comes to everybody else and people I train, it's the same thing. Like you don't want this, and I don't want this for you. So while you're trying to figure out, oh, do I have enough time to run? Yes, we need to add this in there. And the question then becomes, well, do we take away a run in order for you to go lift? Because this is just as important as you getting time on feet. And I think for a lot of beginner runners and hell, even experienced runners, like they try to skimp out on that. And it only leads to one thing: injury. It only leads to one thing: injury. And, it only takes you one bad injury period to like get it. So, it's one of those things of helping people understand that you don't want this. You don't want these problems. You don't want that Achilles tendonitis problems. You don't want that plantar fasciitis problems. I'm telling you, you don't want that. You think you want that? You don't want that smoke. So that is the notion. Make time for the gym and working out, or you make time being injured and being in physical therapy and seeing a doctor. And it's just as simple as that.
That sense, and on the weekend in physical therapy, having to spend time dealing with injuries. So, for everybody listening, get out there and get a lift in.
Yes.
And speaking more, yeah, and speaking more about lifting, can you tell us how you went about putting together a plan? Like, did you work with a weight training professional, or were you able to kind of go through that on your own? How did you go about that piece?
So this is a little fun fact that most people don't know, is that I have a degree in exercise science.
Wow,
So
really?
yes.
Okay, so you were particularly well equipped to be able to do that on your own then.
Yes. And the thing is that like I'm a better coach for other people than I am for myself. But but yes, I have a degree in exercise science. So um it's one of those things when I was in physical therapy and like talking to the physical therapist, and she'd be like, wait, like you know too much about specific terms and how things is going, like what are you doing? And it's like, oh, I got this degree in physical exercise science. It's like, well, why are you here? And it's like, because I'm hard-headed and I don't listen to my own, I don't listen to myself. But
Oh,
I can
that is
program,
funny.
I can program the hell out of somebody's training plan though.
So for those of us who do not have exercise physiology degrees, what you're saying is reach out to you or a professional who does to get that plan programmed.
Yes, definitely. There's always like you have that, but I would say the main thing that a lot of people suffer for, if you sit on your butt for most of the day, like you 9 times out of 10 you got dead butt syndrome. So like 9 times out of 10, everybody needs some type of glute activation exercises. Bridges, banded bridges, clamshells. Like we all need that because we all sit on our butt for a long period of time. So those are the things that are starters, right? The other thing is like hip flexors. Like a lot of us have tight hips, got to loosen those up. And then the other thing that I always see, like runner's knee is not necessarily I think I see a lot of, but a lot of like plantar fasciitis, a lot of Achilles tendonitis type of thing. And like one of the things or like fun facts that I've used is like whenever I'm sitting at a desk, A, my shoes are off, and B, like I have some type of ball or something that I'm just constantly rubbing my feet on so that um we can help them keep so you can help them keep loose and limber.
Definitely. Yeah, those are some really great practical tips for at least getting started and keeping your body in good shape so you don't end up in the physical therapist office.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, I really had just advocacy for back of the pack runners. Throughout the book, talk about your experience as a back of the pack runner in some of these race sightings, like getting lost because race signs were being taken down, not being able to access water stations because they were being packed away, or the race running out of medals, and your advocacy efforts in that range. And so I want to know if you speak about what some of the efforts look like and how maybe a front of pack or a pack runner could contribute to that advocacy.
That is a great question, right? And this is definitely a question that I've been toying around for the longest, right? I think one of the things that the front of the pack people could do is like, okay, you finished the race, but like stick around, right? I think
Mhm.
the longer you stick around the race, the longer that your handlers and everything that comes with the benefits of like being in the front of the pack, like they're forced to stick around as well. And then you can kind of stay up like no, wait, like no, we're gonna get people through, like we're gonna help people out. So I think like that's one thing. Um I think a lot of the stuff kind of relies on like race directors to really figure out like how to get creative. So like one of the things I always hear is trying to figure out how to work with municipalities. And I know it's different all over the world. So it's kind of a wild, wild west, right? But I think that the goal should be is how can you get creative so that everybody has a equitable time at your race. Um, and I really think like that's something that we really can think of, right? Once you get the elite athletes out of the way, like the race just becomes a running parade that everybody just participates in to get a participation medal at the end of it, or a t-shirt if you're running Peachtree. Um, but like once you get the elites out the way, like nothing else really matters. Nothing else really matters, I believe, right? Because like if you want to do age groups and all that stuff, you can still do that. Like you can still do the math to figure out like who ran the fastest in their age group. And you can do that whether they started last or if they started in the front. So I think, one of the things could be, exploring what does it look like to do or like to reverse the waves after you get the elites out the way, right? Like after you get the elites and like
Hmm.
those people who job is to run fast and make money from running fast, like once you get those other people out the way, like none of this other stuff matters. Like nothing else matters. Nobody else is winning. Like nobody else is even attempting to win. So if nobody else is attempting to win, like what would it look like to just reverse the waves? What would it look like to have the slower people start first and then the next lower and so on and so forth? Like what would it look like to do that? What would it look like to um have people or for people to opt in and um opt in to like get an early start like how they do in trail running, right? Trail running has this notion of like dawn patrol, right? So you get out there, you start running before everybody else, um, but you're able to be supported in the middle and the end of the race versus the other way around. And the way I see it, like I would rather have an unsupported early start, but be supported at the middle and end of the race than the other way around. Like I don't want to be not supported at the end of the race. Like I want water, I want snacks, I want all these other things as well, right? So I think like those are things that like race directors could do. I think the other thing that we really need to do is there's so much gray area that comes with what happens when if and when somebody falls behind the pace limit. There's like so much gray area that just leaves the experience and open for interpretation. And I think race directors need to be a little bit more hard and hard and specific on like their rules of what happens. Because like there has been multiple times where somebody will run a race and it's like, oh yeah, like they let me through, like it was a good, like yeah, it was water there. And then you go back to next year and like that experience is not the same. Right. So I think that really trying to
Mhm.
understand like what does it mean and what's the ramification for when somebody falls behind a pace a pace cutoff. And I think the other thing is that thinking about volunteers, right? Like that's another thing is that you have these volunteers working these long shifts. Like what would it look like to have shorter shifts for the volunteers? Like what would it look like for volunteers to come in waves versus just being at one spot also in the sun for how many ever hours they're out there as well?
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Those are all really great ideas. That in ways that if you're, you said mostly race director, but also if you're a volunteer, something that you could advocate for volunteer shifts. I think I agree with you that that would help. If you're front of the pack runner, staying behind, like you said, or making known to race directors that maybe you would be okay with reversing the waves or running or allowing, encouraging people uh, who feel like they might need extra time to get an early start. Those are all really great ways that we can advocate for everybody to have a good race experience. So I really like that. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. And so moving forward, before we start to wrap things up, and I've been questioning the audience, I want to talk more about Slow AF Run Club, the online community. Um, how do I know it's not the focus of your book, but I wanted to know, you hint at it a few times, and I'm curious to know, how do you foster community with this running group that consists of members who are all around the world?
This thing is the hardest thing ever. It's hard because I know in the intro it says I have about 10,000 members. Well, we're close to almost 20,000 members inside the community, and it's like herding
Wow.
cats, um, literally and figuratively. It's like herding a bunch of cat runners. I rely on the membership. I rely on my moderators to help me out, and they're a great bunch. But I think one of the things that we did early on is that we created these pillars that we still rely on today. And I think that it's these pillars that I set as an example that now, even when I'm not in there because I'm traveling, they are there. And the other members around understand that, oh, like this Martinez don't play with that, right? So for example, weight loss talk. Like we don't talk about weight loss in the community. I don't care how much weight you lost or gained. Like, are you running? Are you moving? Like that's where I care about, right? And I think like it just
Mhm.
provides a different mindset and insight about running that's traditionally different from like what's currently out there, right? Most running is all about numbers and it's about competing and it's about I got to this distance in a shorter distance or not sure in a shorter number than you. Um, but then I go back to the whole notion of like if you're not a professional athlete, then none of this matters. So like, why are we taking ourselves so seriously about numbers on a stopwatch, knowing that we're not going to win anyway? Like, we're not even set up to even win. Like, we're not in the first corral. So getting people to understand that, like, you don't have to take yourself seriously, um, kind of makes this community, like, everybody kind of understands that. And it kind of gives the community like liberty to like really enjoy running and enjoy each other, because you don't have to deal with posturing and like when you show your numbers to show like, oh, I'm morally superior than you because like I run 5 minutes a mile faster than you, right? In this community, that stuff don't matter. We don't care about that. Like, I tell people in our community, like, your pace is the least interesting thing about you. Like, I want to know more about who you are and what your mindset is than your pace. And I think by being able to offer that and like foster that, it gives the community more options to have deeper, nuanced conversations than just the typical, how do I get faster, or like, do I train for speed or distance when I start running?
Mhm. That's great. I love that perspective. And I'm sure that that's why this community has grown from 10,000 to 20,000 and counting as you go. That's a really great attitude. Um, and with that, I would think that that's a great spot to open the floor to audience questions. Anyone have any, feel free to either type in the chat box if you'd like for me to ask, or if you'd prefer to unmute yourself and ask the question yourself, feel free to do that. As I pull up the chat box right now. Yeah, and while people are typing, I'll go ahead and ask, which is, uh, what is your current relationship with running like? Like, are you training for anything right now?
Absolutely not.
And what look for your current?
So I'm absolutely not training for anything. I'm on a 40-date book tour, which kind of makes training for a race like a half or full very difficult when um every week or sometimes every other day you're in a different city or town. So I'm definitely not training for anything now. And it actually is actually I'm actually having fun doing by doing it this way. So like I'm able to like cheer more. I'm able to be around the finish line and like cheer people on and like provide that example of like what I wish like more people would do. So for example, I was at Missoula Marathon and I literally stayed out there like the whole day. Like I had snacks in my backpack. I took a lunch break, but I was out there the whole day cheering people on, giving high fives, so on and so forth. And it just felt so amazing to do that. So while running has been like in the backseat more or less this year, cheering and supporting has been more in the forefront. And the model, right? If you're not running, you're cheering. So I am having a ball cheering.
Mhm. Yeah, and honestly, for some of those longer races, cheering can take up just as much energy as running itself. I mean,
That
when you're on
part.
this on the sideline, like you said, you had to pack snacks, a whole lunch. I'm sure you had your hydration plan. Like it's not light work, you know?
It's not light. It's not for the faint of heart. My hand was so red from all the high fives that I gave out. They was dry because like I'm like reapplying hand sanitizer every 15 to 20 minutes because I'm like literally giving out so many high fives. Yes, it was definitely Um, it was definitely a journey.
Yeah. And so what's the next stop
So
on
after I
your
get
on your 40-day book tour?
so after I get done talking to you, I get on the plane and I head to Nashville. So I'll be at Fleet Feet Nashville this weekend. And then after that, I'll go to Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Never been there before. And then from there, I'll go to Falmouth, Massachusetts. So I'll be at Falmouth Road Race. And then at the Falmouth Road Race, it kind of gets blurry for me. Not necessarily sure what happens at the Falmouth Road Race. Um, what happens at the Falmouth Road Race? I think I may have a day or two break, and then I go in September. I have a bunch of like smaller tour stops. So instead of doing races, I will be um at a bunch of running shoe stores. Actually, I'm pulling up the calendar as we speak. Um, so after Falmouth Road Race, I got 2 stops in North Carolina, and then it's just smaller distances. So like, or not distances, but like Fleet Feet Bloomington and like Playmakers in Detroit and like Gazelle Sports, and then potentially Akron Marathon. And then we get into October and it's like full on marathon season. So Chicago Marathon, I'll be there. I'll speak 1 day or 2 days in Hartford Marathon, and then I hop on an airplane and they go speak at Detroit Marathon. And then Indianapolis Marathon weekend, I'll be there. New York City Marathon,
Wow.
I'll be there as well. Richmond, and then Philly. So these are like back to back to back to back to back weekends. Like once you get done, like once you get out of August and into September, it's almost race season all over again.
Yeah, it sounds like it with the travel schedule you'll be sustaining. Well, I hope everybody got all of that, because I'm sure you'll see some of the people on this call at these various locations. In the last couple of minutes we have, I did get one question in the chat regarding lifting. The question is, are the exercises doable at home or do they require a gym membership?
So in the book, because the follow-up is that are there suggestions in the book? In the book, there are tons. There are 2, maybe 3 circuits of exercises of upper body and lower body. Um, they all can be done at home. Some of them you may need like dumbbells, but every exercise that's in the book gives you an option to modify it to make it harder or modify it to make it easier. So I did that because I don't know where people are going to be at in this, while reading this book. Are they going to be at home? Are they going to be on the track? Are they going to be at the gym? But I think that it provides enough information that you can do these exercises at home and with body weight, and you can modify it to make it easier as well.
All right. Well, great. I hope that answers your question. If there's a follow-up briefly, please type that in the chat. But otherwise, um, I know you have to catch your flight to Nashville. So I just want to say thank you again, Martinus, for coming to speak with us at Runners Who Read. This was such a fun conversation. And I speak for all of us when I say we really appreciated the advice you've given. I know for me personally, a lot of the things that you said about advocacy are things that I'll take with me, and are action items that I'll be sharing and working on myself. When I'm at road races, I'm not at road races too often because I am an 800 runner. But I know a lot of people who run road races, and if there's a role that I can play in advocacy, that's something that I'm really happy to be able to do. So thank you very much, and thank you all for coming to watch another great installment of the Run to Read live conversation. Um, it's been another fun one with our guest, Martinus Evans, who is the author of Slow AF Run Club, author of Slow AF Run Club, and founder of the Slow AF Run Club online community. And we look forward to seeing you at the next conversation.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for coming. And with that, okay, I have to say that because that's where we end the recording. And yeah, I think that's everything. So yeah, outside of the podcast recording, thank you very much. This has been so fun, such a fun conversation. Thanks for working with me through the technical difficulties. And I wish you the best on your tour. I hope that we cross paths at some point and I'll have an opportunity to meet you in person.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I really look forward to meeting you in person, and yeah, we'll definitely be around in the spaces.
Yeah. All right.
All righty.
Well,
Take care.
I will say, okay, good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.